my best to give you some fresh information tonight. There's a little bit of replication, but some fresh information. And for me, you know, after 21 years of being in solar, nearly 22 years of being in solar, we really are disrupting now. We are a major disruptive force in a good way, and so that's the kind of theme that I've taken, and this is a nice definition that helps set the scene. There's a few slides here that I'll just run through. I'll try not to bang on too much, but I tried to characterise the market a little bit as it has evolved, and I chose the characteristics of the market buyers as I've seen them and the impacts on the market rather than volumes, but the colours represent the penetration of solar into different states, which is a fairly good representation of where it's at. But the thing that I've done on this is really overlaid from people that I'm talking to right across the value chain in Australia about where it's getting hard to connect, where we really are at the end of this causing network disruption. And as you would expect, it's on the fringes of major cities. In the urban centres and where there's new grids and where there's new networks and so forth, where not so much of a problem, but when you start getting to the edges, when you start getting into rural and regional areas, when you start getting near swirl lines, when you start getting out of the major urban centres, that's really where the connection problems are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Frankly, you know, as many people have said, and as you read from myself and many other people, the fact that we are causing such disruption at the moment and that these barriers are coming up for us so often is more a function of the fact that the major DNSBs have failed to recognise that solar is actually going on, and that it's continuing to grow, and it's in fact not even going to slow down as much as they try to slow it down. But what we are seeing year after year after year, we looked at this last year and predicted and saw, and indeed now it's happening, that barriers are continuing to come up, and while ever they can protect their business interests, they will continue to do so. So we're a real disruptive force in the market now. That's a negative, but it's also a huge opportunity for us to innovate around that. In terms of economics, I won't dwell on this one, but I did pull up some ABS statistics the other day to look at where PV fits in the grand scheme of business economics in Australia. It's quite interesting because when you look, for example, at the value of sales in the electricity sector, it's surprisingly low. It's less than $30 billion a year. And when you look at how solar PV has grown, firstly, we've grown more dramatically than any other business sector of these three that I chose that I'm comparing us to. But secondly, when you look at how we are impacting on those industry sectors, you can see why they're so disrupted by us. Our $4 billion worth of revenue is now represents something like 13% of the utility space. So that's revenue that they don't have anymore because we're taking it away from them. So that's why they're really pissed off. And then of course, if you look at wholesale and retail trade, I chose those two because I thought they were interesting metrics. And when you look at our industry, we're effectively, you know, like any other wholesale business, whether it's light bulbs or books or whatever else. We have wholesale parts to our business and we have retail parts to our business in our industry. And so what I did was I tried to position this and say, well, if we were looking at solar retailing, for example, as part of the overall retailing economics of Australia, how big are we? And we're almost 7% of the entire retail value of Australian markets. That's all retail sales in Australia. So we're not insignificant anymore. We're actually really bloody significant. So anyone who's in the retail space or anyone who's in the wholesale space, or if you're sitting back doing economics analysis or looking at business models or looking at what businesses, what parts of the industry, the wider economy are growing or shrinking, we just keep ranking on those charts and we are disrupting those models. A great little graph here that shows the ebb and flow in recent time, in fact going right back to 92, 93, of different sectors of the industry. And it's interesting to see, particularly in the retail and wholesale trade, which is where most solar is done, most solar trade is done, that sector's actually been declining, but if you look at us, we've been growing. So we're actually adding growth to a sector that's in decline, so that makes us even more important in that sector. So it's really interesting to dig around and look at that. I won't dwell on it. What it all says is that we're very material in a broader economic sense. I also thought it was worth touching on the fact that some of the methods that are being used to get solar into the market are highly, highly disruptive. They are really rocking the utilities world in a bad way, not in that way, but in a bad way. And there was great proof of this the other day because the AER, who manages the retail exemptions that allow an increasing number of companies, solar companies, to offer solar PPAs, came out with an update to its regulations or its guidelines around solar PPAs. And there was a whole lot of stakeholder feedback from a whole lot of companies in the industry. The Clean Energy Council offered some feedback, utilities offered feedback, solar retailers and PPA providers offered feedback. And it was really, really interesting. So, I mean, if you haven't noticed, the Australian Energy Regulator has now issued 30 retail exemptions for companies to offer PPAs in Australia. Now you go back 6 months, there was 0. Maybe a bit more than 6 months, but effectively 0. So from 0, we now have 30 companies in Australia who are approved by the AER to offer PPAs. Some of them are active, most of them are in the formative stages. There were some great announcements from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, who were behind a couple of those projects recently. And so they're starting to roll now. And what was interesting to me was that the AER said, well, everyone's given us some feedback, so we better have a look at what people are saying. Does the process work? Is the exemption really working satisfactorily? What do people think about it? And I won't read through it, but what you can see is not understandably, expectedly, the utilities came out and said, oh, no, you know, this is dangerous. You can't let this many companies get out there and do solar PPAs. They should be more heavily regulated. They should be more tightly controlled. And in fact, the AER came out and said, actually, we don't agree. What we think is that the territory, the game, the rules of the game, if you like, are balanced enough such that retailers have some advantage and some disadvantage, and solar PPA providers, in the AER's view, should be and will in fact be allowed to continue to get in without having a retail licence and to sell PPAs to people who continue to buy through a utility as their primary supplier. There was an interesting one there. The second one I thought also was interesting when the utilities predominantly came out and said, well, hang on, you've got to decide whether, you know, solar is essential and non-essential, or you know, and all energy is essential, so you know, you can't differentiate between solar PPAs and regular supplies being essential or non-essential. The AER again agreed that there is a difference between what solar PPA providers are doing and what traditional electricity providers are doing, so they said, no, we don't care. So the long and the short of it is effectively the AER, the Australian Energy Regulator, has said, you know what, we've had a little crack at this solar PPA thing, we've issued some exemptions, we've got some people doing things in the market, and their results after having a little trial are, we're actually pretty happy with this, it's working pretty nicely. So they've really given us the big thumbs up and said, you just keep going. So it's a very, very interesting space. If you didn't know, solar PPAs in the US represent about 50% of sales. Right? In fact, they've reached a point where they've now peaked in the US, and they now see them actually coming off the boil, and ownership and various other things becoming more important. But we have virtually zero penetration of solar PPAs in Australia, so we've got a whole lot of catching up to do and a whole lot of opportunity. I don't think a PPA works for every market, I don't think it works for every customer, but it's a really interesting space that's clearly going to grow. Oh, I'm going to go back one. No, I'm going to go forward one. There we are. Disruptive barriers. This is the other one, which I get really annoyed at arbitrary things. I think it's really bloody lazy on the part of the distributed network service providers. I did a quick survey of a bunch of different customers that I've worked with, both from installers all the way through, and pretty much everyone's telling me that once you get past the 30% penetration limit, most network service providers will say you can't connect, or you've got to put export limitation devices on. In some areas, they're more strict about it, they're tougher about it, in others they're not. But as a general rule, what I'm hearing and seeing almost everywhere across Australia now is as soon as you get close to that 30% penetration limit, they start making your life a whole lot more difficult. Now, I understand why they're doing that. We all understand they don't want voltage rise, they don't want distortion in the network. We don't want to cause that. That would be bad. We don't want to disrupt the quality of supply in Australia by putting lots of renewables on.
However, what really annoys me is that they only look at the negative impacts and they only look at the costs and they throw it all back on the consumer. I'll give you an example. I actually had a lady ring me the other day from Victoria. She had, she was on the end of a line. There were 3 houses in a typical rural Victoria area. Neighbour had 2 kilowatts of PV on. The other 2 houses had no PV on. She applied to have 5 kilowatts of PV put on her house. The distributor said to her, you may not put 5 kilowatts on, you may put 1 kilowatt on. And I said, 1 kilowatt, what's going on here? It turns out those 3 houses share a 10 kVA transformer. So what they've done is they said, you've hit 30%, we'll let you do 30%. Life's really simple for us below 30%. She said, what am I going to do? Why are they doing this? So I explained this nominal 30%, arbitrary 30% rule that they're applying across the board, which is just lazy. They should be putting a lot more effort into work out where we can have much higher penetrations. In some areas in Queensland, we've already got 60 or 70% penetration. We know it works. It's fine. There's no problem with it. So we really need a more granular approach. But she said, what can I do? How do I respond to my utility? I said, 3 things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can say, why is there only a 10 kVA transformer supplying 3 houses? That seems inadequate to me. So I'd like you to upgrade the network, and I don't expect to have to pay for that because you're the network service provider. I said the second thing you can do is encourage all your neighbours to go and buy 2 or 3 5 kilowatt air conditioners. Put them on the house and see how the network responds. What do you think the network will do? Will they charge you for upgrading that network? Absolutely not. They will upgrade that network in a flash if you apply load, right? So I said, what you're going to have to do is try and game them to upgrade the transformer, and then you'll have more capacity, you can add that 5 kilowatts of PV. So it's a perverse kind of situation that we've got. This, of course, none of this takes into account all the benefits that PV offers, and they're being extraordinarily lazy and slack about valuing those benefits and simply taking the easy way out, which really annoys me. Disruptive market prices, there you go. So the other thing that I did was, in terms of looking at the market and what's going on in our market, I've chatted with a number of people, and I'm sure as a PV manufacturer and supplier, the distortion in pricing in the market is I'm sure something that Terry spends an awful amount of time lamenting. Having been in the PV manufacturing space myself some years ago, I do appreciate the investments that manufacturers have to make, and everyone in the supply chain has to make. And of course, we've all got price compression and we've got margin compression, and it's a very, very tough operating environment for all of you in the industry, I'm sure. What I really see here, though, is incredible distortion in pricing. And in fact, I was talking to a manufacturer this afternoon. They said, "What do you see as a range of, pricing in Australia at the moment?" I said, "Well, the lowest price I've had in the last week is 33 cents a watt." And they fell off their chair and said, "No one can do that." I said, "Well, they're doing it, by the way. I can get it for you. How much would you like?" But of course, that's not a real price, right? So what we've got is this incredible distortion. And in fact, talking to these guys, they were saying Australia has the most distorted pricing in the world. There is nowhere else in the world where you'll find such a range of low to high and wholesale buying price in the supply end, nor will you find such a range of pricing at the high end, at the retail end. My mother-in-law was door-knocked yesterday by an Amway salesman. Did the pitch, sold her some Amway, and then once he finished selling the Amway, he said, "By the way, would you like a solar system?" And this is true. She rang me yesterday while I was downstairs, and she said, "Well, yes, actually, I would. My electricity bill's very high. I'm very worried about, blah, blah, blah." He said, "Great, I can sort you out. I'll send you some information." And an hour later, she had an email from this solar company that said, "Thanks for your order. By virtue of this email, we've confirmed your order. We've contacted the utility. We're arranging connection. We will deliver the goods next week. Thanks for confirming your order with us." So she inadvertently, from this Amway guy, had said a couple of things that he took as being a confirmed order and had effectively sent her an invoice straight away, which was quite incredible to me. What was even more incredible was that the price was 88 cents a watt installed, which is a very, very low price. So we have this incredible distortion in tactics and pricing and everything else, and of course that makes all your life quite hard in terms of trying to make profit. The other bit which someone else described, I won't say what someone described what this picture looks like over a few drinks last night, but it's kind of like what's inside my head, and I try and put it into pictures sometimes, so I apologise if it doesn't make sense. But For me, I've said for almost the entire time I've been in PV that there is only one real tangible outcome from solar, right? It's a 0 or a 1. You're either generating energy or you're not generating energy, right? It's digital. If you're generating energy, you can convert that into money, you can sell it. There are a lot of different ways of selling it. If you're not generating it and you're using it, then it's a 0 or 1 on the consumption side, right? So it's all about digitizing. It's ultimately zeros and ones. It's about data, right? And around all of this, what I'm seeing in the market is this incredible increasing sophistication around what we can do with that data, what we can learn with that data, what we can predict with that data. And in the world of finance, particularly, where I'm spending a lot of time at the moment, the necessity and the power and the strength of this data is quite profound. From being able to see the solar energy potential on a roof very, very accurately by satellite instantaneously, which you can now do. So you can forecast that almost instantaneously, taking into account automatically measuring the pitch of the roof and doing all sorts of things. Then, of course, we can measure it when the system's operating. We can collect data. You can collect it at a micro level using a micro DOC. Very small. So micro inverted products that can go right down to granular levels. So you've got this granular, amazing data. Then you get into the software that hangs off the back of that manipulates the data that says, are things doing what they were supposed to do? Are they performing the way they were supposed to? Has there been a fault? Do we need to go out? All of these things, and I won't read through them all, but of course then you get right back to the end and then you've got custom systems, you've got inverter-based systems, you've got agnostic systems that can read everything no matter what the device is. But all of it comes back to one thing, and that's data management. And in fact, there are companies now, and all they do is specialise in the warehousing and management of your data. They don't even do any of the stuff around the edge. All they do is manage and warehouse your data. Let alone the billing, if you're doing PPAs or loans and various other things where you need to be sharing that information and making financial promises or commitments or payments or bills or whatever they may be. So data, for me, is a hugely disruptive thing for our industry because there isn't a one-stop solution for all this at the moment. There are bits all over the place, but it's highly disruptive for our market right now. But something that's really interesting. That's my slide. Done. So I hope that was interesting. I'm happy to take questions if you've got any.
Now that was a very, very good presentation. Now I understand it. I'm reading about this disruptive thing, I'm thinking, what's who's disrupting who? So that was very, very good. And also your starfish diagram also had me completely and utterly flummoxed. I didn't realise you were that way inclined, but yeah, I think you really need to see a doctor about that. Now, where are we, Samir? We're all there? Okay, so some questions for Nigel.
We hear a lot about the gold plating of the electricity system. Now, why have we missed the boat in not gold plating it to let solar into the matrix, I guess? Is there something that can be done, or is it too late? Is that money spent?
In summary, there's a couple of short answers to that. One is, the investment cycle in all that gold plating stuff is a very long cycle. So the planning before they actually get to spend the money and all that kind of stuff, it's years and years and years and years and years. So the investments that we've seen in the last 5 years were all planned 5 years before that and so on. So there's a very long cycle in it. And of course, demand has done things that they didn't expect. So that's confounded it. Have we missed an opportunity? I don't think we have missed an opportunity. However, of course, fundamentally, the system is not geared yet for them to make money out of solar. It's geared for them to make money out of selling energy one way, and they don't know how to make money out of it going the other way, or how to make money out of selling less energy yet. The day that innovative retailers work that out is when it will start to change, because the regulatory environment, the policies that drive this kind of structural situation that we've got, That's going to take years to shift. But what I think will shift it fast, and I think what we've seen in the US that's shifting it faster, is when retailers start to get on board and say, actually, we can make money out of selling less energy, we can make money out of distributed generation and storage and electric vehicles and whatever it may be. And when they start forcing the argument, things will move a lot faster. So I think it'll continue to move pretty slowly, but then it'll kind of ramp pretty fast, and then we'll see the changes in the network we need.
If I could just add to that in terms of missed opportunities, right now the AER is reviewing the regulatory framework for regulation of distribution businesses in New South Wales, ACT and Tasmania. So this is, I think, potentially an opportunity for us. The consultation period is pretty brief, so you need to put in your views by the 8th of August. The thing that was most apparent to me is that in speaking to distribution businesses, there are several that I've spoken to that are saying that already they see storage and distributed generation as a more economic alternative than line augmentation in a lot of the network, not everywhere, but in a lot of the network. But none of that's been factored into the regulatory reset for the next 5 years for New South Wales. So if we don't get in soon and say, guys, you know, this is coming, it's not a secret. People know that the cost of storage is coming down. People know there's a lot of potential for savings there, and you're not even taking account of it. We need to put that to the regulators, and we need to say that in the next few weeks.
And also, I guess, we're hearing the 30% target for solar penetration, and that's saying that transformers can't feed back. So I guess the investment has to be made into that transformer technology that actually can feed back to feed the rest of the network. And I think that's probably an important point that has gone missing somewhere.
I think the network's actually realising now that in the future developments they're going to be, it's going to be smarter for them to have a series of microgrids or smaller grids with thinner connections. They see that as the way to go, particularly in the regional utility network operators in Queensland and South Australia. They're both saying that that's the future. Their biggest problem, though, is that gold plating that already happened, or the sort of the unsmart investment, that's locked in. That's locked into people's bills, and that puts them at a competitive disadvantage because they can no longer reduce without taking a write down on the value of those assets. Then they can't actually lower their costs, which means that solar will continue to provide an interesting opportunity for them. And that's actually something that got come up in my presentation, is that, they've actually got to reduce that built-in cost somehow.
It's more the financials, they've built the backbone of the system, so the system should be able to take it, but the financials are having the difference.
Yeah, well, he said it's the financial problems. It's not a technical problem, and the guys from Energex admit that. They're saying this is not a technical problem; it's a financial problem. Yeah.
Another issue to be aware of too on grids is, in terms of opportunities and the danger of missing an opportunity is it's likely we'll see the privatisation of grids in New South Wales and Queensland in the not too distant future. It would be pretty short-sighted to privatise that before structural reform that takes account of the disruptive changes that we're talking about, but we're very likely to see governments that just want to maximise the sale value, in which case we're going to lock in outdated models right at the worst time to lock those in.